Because if God only holds guilt, then only God can redeem us from the guilt. So when I think of this cause of guilt, if I look at this biblical idea of the cause of guilt, I need to understand that sin is the cause of guilt. As we have worked through these words, like grief and sorrow and anxiety and worry and guilt, these aren't fun ones to talk about, but they're important ones to understand the biblical word of what it means, because if I can understand what guilt is, and I can understand the sin it's caused by when I transgress God's law, it gives me a realness to know that if guilt is caused by the transgressing of God's law, not a feeling, then if guilt is held by God, only God could take away guilt. But until I understand guilt is only held by God, how do I ever get rid of guilt? And people today are walking around feeling like they have chains on because guilt to them is a feeling and they can't get rid of it. People commit suicide based on a feeling of guilt, based on Webster's definition of what guilt is. Because if God only holds guilt, then only God can redeem us from the guilt. So when I think of this cause of guilt, if I look at this biblical idea of the cause of guilt, I need to understand that sin is the cause of guilt. The second problem to this is this. The second thing that steps on my toes is this. If sin is what gives us guilt, Romans 3:23 says we all have this problem. For we all fall short of the glory of we all sin. You ever sat and listened to a preacher preach and he's preaching on a subject that doesn't step on your toes? Yeah, I've been there. Man, I don't have a problem with that. And you're sitting fat and easy in that pew and you're going, it didn't bother me this morning. Guess what? According to Romans 3:23, all of our toes are being stepped on. So let's all be together and realize this problem of guilt. Now, I am trying to paint a bad picture in our minds. This is by design. I want us to look at this and go, this, Dustin, is a problem. Yes, it is. But the problem, God has provided a solution to. See, here's the catch again. If God is the one who holds guilt, who is the only one who can relieve us of guilt? God. And here's the point. He already has. He already has. So let's walk through some principles. When I look at the cause of guilt and I move myself over to the result of guilt, something's got to take place. Something has to be activated in my life to go, okay, what's going to happen? And if you look at Genesis chapter 3, there was a result of the guilt. There was a result of the sin. We can look at the text and see the result. The relationship between God and Adam and Eve changed as a result of guilt, as a result of sin. Did it not? Before, they would have never hid from God. Before, they never would have felt ashamed by God. But the relationship changed. Listen to me. Because of guilt, there are consequences. There are consequences to our sin, whether you get caught or not, which layers upon layers of this concept of guilt. Because if guilt's simply a feeling, do we only feel guilty when we're caught? But if guilt is a state or condition, we're guilty whether we're caught or not. It's a consequence. There's consequences that ensue. The relationship between God and man has changed because of guilt in Genesis chapter 3. Not only did the relationship change, but there's a separation from God that takes place. Remember, Adam and Eve are in the garden, and they're with God in the garden. And remember what happens when they sinned? If you look later on in Genesis chapter 3, in verse 22, he says, then the Lord God said, behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. Now lest he reach out his hand and take also the tree of life and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him out of the garden. In verse 24, the text says, he drove man out of the garden. There is a separation that takes place when guilt ensues. In Isaiah 59 and verse 2, Isaiah tells us that iniquities separate us from God. Do you know that iniquity is guilt? Because it's on a feeling. I feel bad and that separates me from God. No, it's a state and a condition that I have because I have transgressed God's law, period. Man, that puts me in a bad place. I don't want to have a different relationship with God than the relationship that God has designed. I don't want to be separated from God. There's also discipline that's given in Genesis chapter 3. Remember the consequences that are given, the discipline? Well, now because you've done this, you're going to have to do this, this, and this. You have to till the land. You're going to have to work. You're going to have to bear children. You're going to have to do all of these things as a form of what you've done, the guilt that has ensued. And not only do we understand that there is a guilt, that there is a discipline, that there is a consequence, that there is a separation from God. But I will tell you, there is a feeling that we get. But that feeling is not guilt. That feeling is disappointment. That feeling is frustration. That feeling is something that we don't like. And next week, it's kind of acting as a two-part lesson because that feeling that we get from guilt is shame.